my question is that if Black Hebrew Israelites believe that the transatlantic slave trade is a definitive marker of proof of, just them being descendants of Israelites or something like that, why is it that, from the Old Testament times to the New Testament times, we have direct matches of Deuteronomy 28 and these historic events, and the transatlantic slave trade does not add up? I was wondering, why is that?
Wait, okay, so you need to specify in Deuteronomy 28 what you're talking about, because again, those same curses in Deuteronomy 28. Notice something here; it's a whole chapter. Okay, so you can't pull that nonsense. You need to specify, because again, the same curses did not apply to the Israelites in Judges when they did the exact same thing. And notice something: they were enslaved time and time again in Judges. Yet they did not have a king then. So when you're talking about in Deuteronomy 28, which it talks about a king being enslaved, you can't use that. So specify to people. Stop doing that. That's being just disingenuous.
No, actually, it can. If you look at the king of Assyria, he was taken away. The king he was taken to Assyria, the northern king of Israel. He was taken away in 622 by the Assyrians. So that's when that part was fulfilled. But when I do look at 2nd and 3rd Maccabees, when I do look at 70 AD, and when I do look at 135 AD with the Bar Kokhba uprising, and you look at all the historians and what they write, from Jews to their enemies, they all speak emphatically of Deuteronomy 28:68 actually happening, where they went into Egypt, sold into Egypt as slaves, and some wouldn't even buy them. There was a quote I actually did not put up here, where it said that they were so cheap that no one ever bought them. There was other times where they went into Egyptian mines, other times where they went into Egyptian race events or something like that. It was bad. I mean, it was pretty nasty. I even showed places in 2nd and 3rd Maccabees where the elderly were just marched to death, which which hit an exact verse in Deuteronomy 28. I forget what verse it is, but it's talking about how the elderly would not be treated very well at all. Daughters that you'll beget, but you won't enjoy them. I showed how in 2nd or 3rd Maccabees, how the women actually sung funeral songs at their forced weddings. It was bad. I wish you guys were here, but my question is, how is it that these things can all be seen as actual events of Deuteronomy 28, and they actually went into literal Egypt, and the Bible speaks of going into literal Egypt, and there's no talk of a spiritual Egypt, and yet the transatlantic slave trade just had Africans that left Africa and went to America. They didn't even leave Israel. And the Deuteronomy 28 says that this stuff will happen with Jews leaving Israel into Egypt, but African Americans, they came from Africa into America.
No. When you say that when you say African Americans, who are these African American? Who are these Africans that you're talking about? You need to be specific with that. Don't use the European terminology. Get specific. What tribe? Who are these people? Where did they come from? What were the names? Where did they come from? How did they get here? You're gonna have to specify that.
Okay. I'll do that right now. So give me a second. Can you see this?
Yeah, I can.
To the best of my knowledge, these are the places. You got Senegambia, Sierra Leone, places like Rwanda and Angola, of course, Mozambique. Those are the Africans. I'm pretty sure there's more, but those are the main hot spots. And so the question is, if the prophecy says that you Israelites are going to be gutted out of Israel and planted into Egypt, why is it that the transatlantic slave trade has Africans being gutted out of West Africa and being planted in South America, the Caribbean, and North America, which any of them were Egypt at all? But yet we
Where are you
find
getting
this
Jerusalem?
happening 3 times earlier in history, and they were actually went into Egypt. They did not
Where
go
you
into
get?
any country.
Wait,
So
wait. Where are you getting Jerusalem from?
I'm getting Jerusalem from the fact that when you look at Deuteronomy 28, it
Mm-hmm.
specifically talks about all these curses happening within their land, right? Also, verse 63 is
Okay.
a marker verse that that shows that this Deuteronomy 28:68 is something that happens from Israel itself, which is going totally against uh, you know something happening in Africa going to America. I mean, if I said to you, "Hey, I want you to leave to come to Pennsylvania," and instead you leave New York to go to Los Angeles, you would automatically have to say, well, you didn't take the directions I told you. And so that's what I see when I look at, the history. Africans, they weren't in Israel, they were in Africa. And then when they went to where they didn't go to Egypt, they went to America.
Okay.
And so,
Two things.
yeah,
Well, I'm gonna say three. One, and I just want a yes or no answer to get an understanding of where you're getting this from. But it says in 68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Okay. Now, are you saying the verses prior to this, are you saying that all of these are referring to only in the land of Israel, and that's it, like pertain to the land of Israel or in Egypt? Are you saying that that's it?
well, to be more clear, I'm not saying that all these curses happened within Israel only. No, because that would go against other verses that say, hey, you guys are going to be taken away to a foreign nation. They're going to put iron around your necks, and you're going to go in this place and that place. Well, that shows that those curses, yes, they started in Israel, but
Mm-hmm.
when they carry you and take you away, that's also a part of the curses. So it's not like, oh, these
Okay.
people took us outside of Israel, therefore the curses don't happen no more. No, they're taking you away. That's part of the curses. It's the only difference is this is happening from the bedrock of Israel, from Jerusalem, Judea, from Israel. Um, that's a difference. It's not happening from, you know, uh, Angola.
Okay.
And then you know what I'm saying, it's talking about Herm Tur babes. And one other thing is Deuteronomy. This is the time right before they're about to enter the promised land. So
Okay.
so God is being real specific about this land, which is the reason why I have all these verses up here that talk about these curses being in the land, from the land, like that's the emphasis. you
Okay.
know
So
so
okay,
yeah,
I'm trying to give you sure because I want to get past it so I can understand where you're coming from because I wasn't here.
yeah.
So the other two, the next question. Okay, so pertaining to the fact that these curses do not specifically uh do not have to specifically take place in the land of Israel, okay? Because apparently there was always scattered. They kept getting scattered again and again whenever they were persecuted and whenever they sinned against God.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so with that being said, how do these curses? How does it not follow that these individuals that you're talking about, because again, when I asked you who are these people that you're talking about, all you gave was just a giant landmass and a map to where these people got shipped from this spot to the next. But you're not telling people who these people actually are. You're just saying they're Africans. Who are the actual people, the tribes that they came from? What's the history with them? Where did they come from? That's my question. Who are these people? Because you're saying they come from Africa, but you're not saying
these
where.
people are Africans. They come from many tribes. Some of the Limba tribe, some of the what's the other tribe? I believe there is an Angola tribe. I believe. You have the Igbo tribe. You have you have hundreds of tribes that these Africans that came from, and they went into the West, and so so that's what you have. But once again, the reason why I keep on asking this question is because I think you're ignoring something, and that is, even though you're asking who were these people and where did they really come from, I keep on pointing the fact that where were they picked up at? Were they picked up in Jerusalem, or were they picked up in the Ivory Coast?
Well, you just answered your own question, because again, if these people can receive the curses and they are not necessarily in the land of Israel, of course it will follow that, again, just like the scripture says, these curses will follow you and overtake you till thou be destroyed. We know that Israel is not destroyed, so of course these curses will still follow them wherever they are, as long as they do not come back to the Most High. So
but do you know what that meant, right?
No,
but do you know what that meant, right? That was talking about throughout their captivities, the Assyrian captivity, the Babylonian captivity, Greek captivity.
Every time Israel has sinned against God in Judges, Judges, they will go into captivity. They will be serving some other nation for a certain amount of years. After a judge will get them out, God will deliver the people that was enslaving them out of their hands. What happened? They went back to their sins again. Back in captivity you go. Back in captivity you go. Did God send like a botch from Egypt upon them? No. You would see that in other chapters later, in other books later. But you see that God would deliver a punishment upon them every time they kept sinning against him. So it would only follow that if this is still going on, even during the time of Christ, this is still going on. The question is that if these people, okay, who were the Yoruba, the tribe of Ghana, the tribe of Ga, which is another, which is the tribe of Gad, the Ewes, the Limbas, the Igbos. These tribes came from somewhere, because we know that they're different from the other tribes, which are Hamites that are around them.
No, they're actually not different. That's the part where your pseudo history is coming in, and not only that, but your big issue is that let's just say, because I like to do this sometimes. Let's just say I go ahead and give you the whole thing about how you take that one verse about these things will follow you till you're fully destroyed. Two problems. Problem number one, of course they're not destroyed, and you said yes, that's because they're still around and still things like that. But then the second issue is that because of that, you can no longer marry that to Deuteronomy 28:68, which clearly says that they are going to go again into Egypt in ships. So if you're going to say that, what are they going to do? Are they going to be followed around till they're destroyed, or are they going to go into Egypt again in ships? If you say that they're going to be followed till they're destroyed, then you can no longer say that Deuteronomy 28 is what you use to show that that the Africans were really Israelites and they went into spiritual Egypt in America. You can't say that anymore, because you're on this whole tirade of these curses are going to follow you till you're destroyed. And not only that, but I forget, there's something else that you said. It will come back to me. But yeah, that's just a real issue, and it's I don't know. I think also the fact of the matter is that God is also operating in a new covenant. And a lot of times when that happens, that means that whatever kind of things go on in the old covenant, he's not operating under that anymore. This is the reason why we're going to be judged by Christ, not by Moses or anything like that. If anyone is judged by Moses, that's because they've actually stayed under the old covenant, which means the law is going to judge them, which is the worst thing ever. So these things here in Deuteronomy 28, they're not prophecies, they're conditions. This is God just walking up to Jerusalem and saying, hey, if you do this, this is what I will do for you. If you don't do this, this is what I will have happen to you. It's no different than what he did with David. David was in deep trouble one day, and he was fleeing from Saul. And so he took his prayer shawl somewhere in a cave or wherever he was, and he started to pray to God because he was hesitant about going into a refugee country of a good king that he thought was good. He asked God, if I go in there, will that king treat me well? And God said, yep. And he said, well, if I stay there, will he eventually turn his back on me and sell me to Saul for money? And God said, yep. And then what did David do? He walked up and he went another way, even though God said it would happen if you go and do that, So that just goes to show that, I'm trying to, kill this myth that Deuteronomy 28 is prophetic, because it's not. It's just conditional. It's just as conditional as David. And these are Jews that wrote this in, so-and-so BC. So they definitely understood the scriptures. So yeah, that's an issue. That's really an issue. I just
And I think the main thing that Surreal asked you, that I'm not sure if you got it yet either, is every time that Israel's been dispersed, they were always taken from Israel. That's the point that Surreal's making. That the start off point was, say it again, bro.
No, I ain't saying that.
Oh, okay. The start off point was always from Israel, and then they were dispersed, after they were removed out of the land. The problem that we have with somebody trying to use the transatlantic slave trade is that, number one, they were not in Israel, so that's definitely not the start off point there for the transatlantic slave trade. Not only that, number two, the dispersion of the Israelites that took place after Christ was not because they transgressed Moses, but because they did not listen to Christ's warning to get out of the land before the armies came. So that last dispersion that took place was not a result of Deuteronomy 28. It was a result of not listening to Christ's warning. And plus, with Deuteronomy 28, anybody that transgressed the covenant, there was no way out of it. The scripture said this will happen to you. Even the righteous prophets went into captivities. But yet with Christ's dispersion, Christ gave people a way out and told you, hey, these armies are coming. Get out of here, flee in the mountain. That never happened under Moses. The curses would pursue you, right? But Christ was giving people a way out of this pending curse that's about to come. So that automatically disqualifies that last dispersion from Deuteronomy 28. Not only that, they were dispersing to all nations, and then you had multiple other slaveries that took place after, like the trans-Saharan slave trade. There was a slavery like in East Africa and stuff. Like, you had those different slaveries go on. You had other slave trades that took place prior to the transatlantic slave trade that happened with ships. Like, you have like the Barbary or the East Indian slave trade, the Indian Ocean. These different slave trades that took place. So you have this gap between being dispersed from Israel as a result of not listening to Christ, not Deuteronomy 28. Then you have this long stretch period of time before transatlantic slave trade even happens. And when it does happen, it doesn't start from Israel. It starts from some random place in Africa. So that's the point that he's trying to mention, is that all these times we've seen this prophecy fulfilled, it always took place starting from Israel. Why? Because God was made a point to the Jews that he would remove them from the land. But they weren't removed from the land, being that it started in Africa. They were just taken from Africa.
Right, because Africa was not their land.